now I'm going to introduce you to Martha Hall Kelly. It's funny, you don't have a huge bio presence. I was looking for you, but I love it. It's short, it's succinct. Martha Hall Kelly is a New York Times bestselling author of Lilac Girls and Lost Roses. She lives in Connecticut, and she's a good friend of RJ's, where she spends her days filling legal pads with stories and reading World War II books. So I'm going to let Martha take it away, and I'm going to go dark, and we're going to start the event. So enjoy.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to be here, Patty. And I love RJ Julius so much. It's one of my very favorite bookstores. So thank you for having me. And I thought today what I would do is, for those that aren't familiar with all of my books, give a little refresher on Lilac Girls. You know, it came out in 2016, which it feels like ages ago. And so I thought I'd just do a little refresher on how I came to discover the true story behind Lilac Girls, and then how I wrote Lost Roses, the next book, briefly, and then talk about Sunflower Sisters a little bit. So I'm going to do that for maybe half an hour or so, and then we will answer questions, which is always my favorite. And please, you know, no holds barred, whatever you want to know about. And you can just, you know, when something comes to you, just put it in the chat. No need to wait until the end. So anyway, I'm going to share my screen and share the story of the three books. So Lilac Girls, Lost Roses, and Sunflower Sisters. Of course, it all started with Lilac Girls. And it does seem surreal almost in a way that all of this actually even happened. But it started one day when I read in Victoria magazine a wonderful article about Caroline Faraday. And you can see here, the title of it was Caroline's Incredible Lilacs. And that, it was such a fabulous article. And you can see there's a little picture of the house there. And Caroline, you know, she was an actress, a Broadway actress. And I just fell in love with her instantly. And you can see also a picture of the lilacs at the house. And my mother had just passed away one gray Mother's Day. And my husband said, why don't you go up to the house? And he knew that I had read that article and loved it. And so my mother loved lilacs and I do too. So I thought, why don't I go up and see the house? And I'm sure many of you have been up to see the Woolsey-Ferriday house. It's just so beautiful. And I went that day thinking, okay, I'll have the day all to myself. You know, with three little kids, it was always a bit challenging to do anything, you know, that was of my interest. Usually it was all about what the kids wanted to do. So I went up that day and visited the house, and the garden was absolutely beautiful. Here's the sign. It's owned and operated by Connecticut Landmarks in Bethlehem, Connecticut. And the garden that day was absolutely beautiful. This doesn't show the lilacs. This is more peony season, but it's a great view from the back of the house. And I loved the tour. I just, especially because I had it all to myself. And now they're averaging about 80 people a day at the house. But back then it was very sleepy. And before the books got out and people came there, really paying homage to Caroline. And it was just me that day. And here's a picture of the lilacs. Of course, they're past now, sadly, most of them in Connecticut, but I love this photograph of Caroline's lilacs. It's just, you can almost smell them. They're, you know, they're so beautiful. And so I walked around the property a little bit. It's absolutely a beautiful property. And here is Caroline's Playhouse, which if you go to the Woolsey-Ferriday house today, you can see it. It was in the days when it was a seminary, back in the 1700s, they used this little building as a law office. And then later, when the Faradays bought it, they moved it out there for Caroline's little private playhouse. If I had that when I was young, I don't think I would have ever left it, because that was always my dream, to have a little playhouse. But so when I visit the property, I love going out there. Here's another view of it, which is, so sometimes we do book signings out there, actually. But after I toured the property, I went inside and learned about Caroline Faraday. Back then, the tour was mostly about Reverend Bellamy, because he built the place, and Caroline actually had done a lot of research about Reverend Bellamy as well. But that day, there wasn't a whole lot of information about her. But I still enjoyed the tour. It talked a lot about Caroline as an actress. And this is a beautiful shot of the dining room. And if you take the tour, this is one of the first rooms that you go into. And Caroline used to joke that it was like a French play set, the set of a French play, and because there were so many doors in it, and somebody was always entering or going out of one. Another wonderful thing on the tour is this is crewel work that Caroline and Caroline's mother and her grandmother both did. And that's crewel work from the living room drapes. And this is another great shot of looking out from the living room out over the garden. And upstairs now, because of COVID regulations, you still can't go upstairs, but the upstairs is one of my favorite parts of the house. And this is Caroline's bed, her canopy bed with her dolls. She loved dolls. Even when she was a little bit older, then, most girls give up their dolls. She never gave up her dolls. And that beautiful candlewick bedspread. I was just so taken with the tour. Oh, and here are her dolls. A little worse for wear these days, but maybe they were older than Caroline, like maybe even passed down from her own mother. I'm not sure about that. Also in that same bedroom, you see Caroline's portrait of her as a young woman. And this came back to the house. Actually, Caroline had given this to her French maid, and they had a very close relationship. And once the maid went to assisted living, she gave this back to the house, which was just such a wonderful thing to do. But I was really the most taken with Caroline's desk, which you see, if you've been to the house, right outside Caroline's mother's bedroom. You can see her mother's bedroom to the right there in the back. And I was really, I just was so taken. I know now that she was a Francophile because, from doing research on her for so long. But at the time I thought, I was really intrigued by, she had a picture of Charles de Gaulle and a lithograph of Napoleon and her Cross of Lorraine certificate on the wall. But I was drawn to, and you can see it there on the desk, a photograph of around 50 or so middle-aged ladies lined up in rows for photograph. And I asked the docent, who are those people? And she explained that Caroline had done a lot of charity work for France. And this is an example of the type of literature that she used to send out for the children of resistance fighters that had lost their lives. And she just told me the whole story about Caroline, and that these women in the picture were part of her charity work, because she brought 50, there were 54 that survived experiments at Ravensbrück concentration camp when these women were younger. They were Polish Catholic girls that had been operated on by the Nazis when they were imprisoned at Ravensbrück for their work in the underground. And she explained that Caroline heard about them from her French friend Geneviève de Gaulle, the niece of Charles de Gaulle. And Caroline brought them to the United States for the trip of a lifetime and rehabilitation. Some of them, these lucky ones, there were actually 5 of them. One of them is taking the picture, got to stay with Caroline, and they spent Christmas with her. You can see that little Christmas tree. It was so beloved by Caroline because the women brought it with them from Poland, which is pretty amazing. A lot of them had never been on a plane before. And you see all the gifts there. And they were very worried when they first came because they didn't speak English and they were Catholic. And at the time, in the 1950s, being Catholic, there were a lot of people discriminated against Catholics. So I just love that photograph because you see how happy Caroline is, and the girls too. They had been through so much. I love this picture of the girls when they took, they all stayed in different places with different families that put them up, of course, as their guests. And then they all met in California and did some fun things, and then took a trip back across the United States. And so this is one of the press clippings from when they stopped at Knott's Berry Farm. And I just love it. And this next one is another press clipping. Caroline was so, she used PR in a really interesting way. She was trying to get the women reparations from the German government, and they were digging in their heels in Bonn, but she used the press in a really interesting way, just to show the outpouring of love and support for these women. And of course, from reading Lilac Girls that she eventually got those reparations for them. But yeah, they were all over the country. And these, of course, are from Detroit. And so after I discovered that story at the house, I was just blown away by it. And I thought, I never thought about writing a book about it, but I moved to Atlanta, and all of a sudden, I was a Yankee lady in Atlanta with no friends. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to write a book now. I went through a Starbucks drive-through and by mistake got a caffeinated beverage and went home and started writing Caroline chapters because I had done so much research on her. But I wanted to add 2 other characters. I wanted to add one of the so-called rabbits, one of these women who had been operated on by the Nazis. And that ended up being Kasia and Lilac Girls. And I wanted to add this woman. And this is Herta Oberhauser. She was a Nazi doctor. You see her BDM pin there on her lapel. She fascinated me, and she fascinated Caroline too, because Caroline, I found a lot of research on her in Caroline's archives. But I thought, how could this woman do this to these women? They were young and healthy, and Herta was not that old. She was, barely out of her 30s. And so I launched into a lot of research, and I thought, I need to go to Germany and Poland, because when I started writing in their voices, I couldn't really do it because I'd never been to Germany or Poland. So I went, and it was the trip of a lifetime, honestly. I got to talk to not on that trip did I talk to survivors, that happened later, but this is a picture of a wonderful woman named Alicia who survived Ravensbrück, was not a rabbit, but she told me so much wonderful information about the camp. Just little things like how towards the end of the war, they didn't have any more camp uniforms left. So they gave the women regular coats and dresses and things, and they marked a big paint X in white on their backs in case they escaped. The guards would have something to shoot at. And this is Ravensbrück. It is the barracks that you see from the top of the administration building. The administration building is still there, but the barracks are all gone, unfortunately. It would have been fascinating to go into some of those, but they had been taken down long ago when the Russians liberated the camp. One of the people I found out about too in my research was this man. He looks way scarier than I think he was in actuality, in the flesh. His name's Fritz Fisher, and you remember him from, if you've read Lilac Girls. He and Herta Oberhauser were, I don't want to say lovers, but they had some romantic liaisons. And he ended up doing many of the surgeries with Herta assisting, and their boss, Dr. Gebhardt, was really the leader. So, and this is one of my favorite photographs that I absolutely love from, I mean, it's hard to say I love it, but it is a clandestine photograph that was taken at the camp and smuggled out of one of the girls showing her wounds. So that was an incredible trip. I went back again and got a chance to, this is our friend Stasha. She just recently passed away. She's in her 90s, but she was just a lovely person. I met her on my second trip back. So when I came home after that, I found a book on my doorstep, and after my second trip back to Ravensburg, because it took a year to get that book made. Here is the doorman at the Waldorf, because the Waldorf is in the book. So I thought I should, go over there, and they had no idea who I was, but it was still fun. And things started happening, really fun things, like I got on the New York Times bestseller list and people were really excited about it. I got on Jeopardy, which was so fun. They did not guess the answer, sadly, but it was still amazing. I wished my mother had been alive because she was a huge Jeopardy person. And people started coming to book events like Caroline's cousins and people that were related to her, which was so much fun. That's still fun. People, I can't wait to start doing in-person events again, because I always meet some of Caroline's relatives, and it's just so much fun. So after that, my husband said, you really should talk to Random House about doing more books if you want, because if you're, serious about this. So I went back to them and I pitched them on 2 books. One was about Caroline's mother. Isn't this the sweetest picture of Caroline as a just out of babyhood, really, and her mother. And her mom is wearing a corsage of white roses. And so that inspired me to write Lost Roses. And that's all about Caroline's mom, and who I think really inspired Caroline. I had always wanted to write about her, and I found this incredible clipping at the house, and it told the whole story of how they used their home as kind of a store or a bazaar to sell Russian handmade goods. And so, and help these women that had been, they were aristocrats, former aristocrats that came to this country with nothing after the Bolshevik Revolution. And so there are all the characters with horrible terrorists right in the middle. It's Sophia on the left is Eliza's best friend. On the right, you see Eliza, and in the middle is the peasant girl, Varenka, who kind of throws a wrench into all of that. So that was an amazing book to write, and I got to go to Russia. I don't have time to show you too many of the slides, just, a couple of things from Russia. A big part of the book is about the Russian royal family, some of the artwork from the Hermitage. Oh, of course, can't forget the Fabergé eggs, the ballet. And of course, I had to go to Paris. That was, tough duty. Also back to the Hermitage. Anyway, so once that book was another hit, which was fun to say, that was, it kind of catapulted me into the next book. And I was living in Atlanta, and I was writing while I was down there, which is really great because it was a book about slavery. And this is a picture of it. And it was great because on the weekends, I could go around to all the different former plantations that were now museums and research while I was down there. So that was really nice. The plantation that I ended up writing about in Sunflower Sisters is actually called Sauterley, and it's in Maryland, which is a border state. But at the time, I still was, it allowed me to really dig into plantations and plantation mistresses, because I knew, again, I wanted to include all three of these three characters. I wanted one of the Woolseys, like a Caroline character, and I wanted an enslaved girl and a plantation mistress. So the place I started was with the letters down in the archives at the Woolsey-Ferriday house, and there were 1,000 of them. And I read them all, and it was such a trip reading those. And it all started with Jane Eliza Woolsey, and she was the matriarch of this family. So she's Caroline's great grandmother, and what a woman. I'm just so sad I never met her, because she was incredible. And she had 8 daughters and 7 daughters, 1 son. And sadly, her husband died tragically off the coast of Connecticut, actually, in the steamship Lexington when it caught fire. And only 4 people survived, and he was not one of them. So she was left with 7 very young children, and she was pregnant with her 8th. And her son Charles was born after Mr. Woolsey died. Sadly, 7 girls and a boy that he never met. They missed him horribly because he was a really good dad. So it was hard figuring out which daughter to choose to be the point of view character, but I chose Georgiana. She was the middle child, wonderful, the most energetic, creative mind, funny. I just fell in love with her. So I knew I wanted to have her as my point of view character. And also because she wanted to be a nurse, and also to open the first school for nurses. And of course, at the time they said, "You are crazy." But I loved that about her, that she wanted to do that. This is her, I don't have time to show you everyone individually, but this is her sister, Mary, next oldest to her. And they called her the beauty of the family, which I think is so funny, because nowadays, I think we'd be a lot more sensitive than to go around calling one of our children the beauty, but they all said it, and they were all very proud of her. And you can see she was absolutely beautiful in the book. She has kind of a sad story, but Mary was one of my absolute favorites. This is my character board that I put together, and for every book, and this is the one for Sunflower Sisters. And you see Abby and Jane and Mary and Eliza. In the book, Eliza and Georgiana are very good friends. This is the only picture. As the youngest daughter, we don't get pictures taken of our youngest that much, sadly. It's kind of a cliche, but it's true in this case. This is the only picture I've seen of Caroline's grandmother, Carrie. So she's the youngest child of Eliza. I know, it gets complicated. So this is a wonderful picture of the Sanitary Commission, and a big part of the book takes place at the various Sanitary Commission outposts that, spoiler, Georgie becomes a nurse and goes to some incredible battle sites. She also works on the hospital ships, and I found that really interesting, especially because Frederick Law Olmsted was the head of the Sanitary Commission, who of course created Central Park. I thought that whole angle of the story was really interesting as well. They also, in the book, meet Lincoln, which, everything, all the historical events in the book, especially in Georgie's part, were all taken from their letters, and they actually meet President Lincoln. But I also wanted to have not only an enslaved character, but also a plantation mistress. And I loved using this photograph. It was an old tintype that I found as inspiration for my character, Anne May. And this is this is me at Sauterley Plantation, which is in Maryland. It's a tobacco plantation and well worth a trip if you're ever down there. But it was a wonderful place because they have an enslaved cabin that they renovated where the enslaved on the plantation used to live. And, it's just incredible that 25 people slept in there. And it was really inspiring to walk around Sauterley. I also went to Charleston, where the book opens, because there was a letter that was also very inspiring about how the girls go to a slave market in Charleston, and they see a woman, they see people being sold, and it's really, it marks them for life to see this. And I thought it would be really important to go to the Slave Museum in Charleston, and it was really an important part of the research. This is the inside of the plantation house, Sauterley. You can see it's a huge contrast to where the enslaved people were. It's a very beautiful museum, and the best part is they don't shy away from talking about slavery. And because a lot of plantation houses that you go to these days, it's changing, but especially back when I was doing research down around Atlanta, they just kind of go right by the whole idea that the plantation was founded on slavery. So I think Sauterley does a really nice job of that. I also went to Gettysburg with my son, who's a videographer. He took this picture of me in the freezing cold at Gettysburg, because this is the exact place. If you look over next to the train tracks on the other side, that fenced area was once where Mrs. Woolsey and Georgie set up their own satellite hospital for the wounded at Gettysburg. And that's a little bit of a spoiler. I'm sorry if you haven't read the book already, but when you read the book and come to that part of the book, you can think of this little area, because it still is still there, not the hospital tent anymore. But it's amazing to think that she and her mom set up a whole hospital right there. And I'm almost finished. I have 2 more slides. And this one I love because this is the 3 sisters. And I always get them mixed up, but I think the one in the middle is Georgie and Eliza and Jane. And so it's just, I love thinking of them as ladies, they're kind of in their prime at that point. I feel like after reading a lot of their letters, I feel like they were raised in such a way that they felt that they could really express themselves in that time, which was unusual. They were so well educated. And again, I would give anything to have just been able to talk to them and have lunch. And this is my last slide. And this shows just kind of a collage of all the things that inspired me. On the upper left-hand side, of course, the sunflower, which has a really special meaning in the book. It's a little bit of a spoiler, so I'm not going to tell you, but in the Underground Railroad, the sunflower had a very interesting meaning. Of course, Georgiana, the hospital ships. This is a picture I found of an artifact. It is a badge, and it says Runaway Slave Patrol. And that was the beginning. In the book, there are some men called patty rollers, which is another word, the way that they said patrollers. And they were the precursors to the Ku Klux Klan. So when you read the book, LeBaron Carruthers and his men, that's the precursor to the KKK. This is a photograph that I used as inspiration for Gemma's mother. Gemma is the enslaved girl. She's a house slave on Peeler Plantation. And I just love, I think she's so beautiful and so just lovely. And I based Gemma's mom, Sable, on this woman in the photo. This is a photo to the left of that of the draft riots. I had learned about it in school, but once I dug into it for research, I just was blown away by what happened. It was the largest insurrection in the United States. It was 3 days long, and it was an Irish mob. You can see here, they're burning down New York, basically, because they didn't feel that it was fair that wealthy people could pay to get out of the draft. And it turned into a race riot, actually, because they were also angry that newly freed Blacks from the South were coming north and taking their jobs as longshoremen. So that's in the book, and that's all based on when they burned down the colored orphan asylum. So, and to the right is a random soldier that I just used as inspiration, an auction sale flyer, which is really moving, I think, to see people's names. There's a Martha, number 3, who is age 2. So it's just, I can't tell you during my research how moving it was, and just how horrifying and sad as well. This woman to the upper right, I used her as inspiration for the mother of Anne May, the mother of the mistress of the plantation. And she was a piece of work. I know if you've read it, you know that. And then just another letter, and Eliza Jane, or Jane Eliza. And this was my inspiration for Anne May's cat named Saint Joan. And I just thought I would share her with you. So that is it. I'm going to go back to the original, where it all came from, Lilac Girls. And now I'm going to stop my screen share so that we can talk questions, which should be fun. I hope you have some good questions. Not good questions. I hope you have some questions, and I'll answer whatever you're interested in.
There are definitely some questions. I have a few of my own, but one, and I knew this was going to come. When you write your next books, will you consider another trilogy? And on the flip side of that, there's another person that can't get enough of the Woolsey family and wants more.
Oh, more than that?
That's they said they can't get enough. So
well, then they have to go to my website then, because I have a lot of good stuff on my website. I also have a Pinterest page. I don't know if you do Pinterest, Patty. I love Pinterest. And I have, as I'm writing, whatever I'm writing, I always pin photographs of the family and whatever I'm writing about, so they can go to Pinterest for that. That's kind of fun. And then I have a blog on my website that has a family tree of the Woolseys. And there's a wonderful book called My Heart Towards Home. I know they have it in the gift shop at the Woolsey-Ferriday house. And that has a lot of the letters in it, if you're curious about that.
All right. So that leads us into, what are you working on next? And will it be a trilogy?
Oh, the trilogy question.
Yes.
Wow. I wouldn't be opposed to a trilogy. It's hard sometimes because people, they get spooked by trilogies sometimes, because they think, oh, I have to read if I haven't read the last one. But I wouldn't be opposed to that. What I'm working on next is my other books. I went back in time after Lilac Girls, and that was really fun. But I've always wanted to go forward in time after Lilac Girls. And so that's what I did this time. And it's a book about 2 badass women that survive Ravensbrück, and some bad things were done by Nazis to them during, the time that they were prisoners at Ravensbrück. And when they get out, they go after the man that did bad things to them. They hunt him down, basically, because I don't know if you know that much about the rat line and what happened after the war with all the Nazis. There were hundreds of thousands of Nazis that just disappeared, and they escaped justice. So these 2 women, one American, because there were 5 Americans at Ravensbrück, which is really, I think, fascinating. one American, half Jewish, and the other is French, and they team up and go at it. So it was really fun writing about the 1950s. I mean, I was born in 1957, so I didn't really, I wasn't aware of my surroundings at that point, but I love that era. And it's been so much fun to write about that and to go all over the world, because they go from Vienna to Rome to Paris to South America, hunting down their prey. So anyway, that's that. And that comes out next fall. And then after that, I'm writing a thriller, or I've already written it, but that's when the thriller comes out. And that I've written here. The setting is my house here in Connecticut. It says that it's Massachusetts, but it's actually my house. And it's scary, I gotta say. It's fun. I love thrillers. So I love writing one, and this is current day, and it's just one protagonist. I had to give up the doing three because my agent was like, you have to do other things, and I agree. But it was really fun. But I live on a hay farm in Connecticut. It's scary to be here by myself sometimes, and my husband, I writing the scary parts for the book, my husband said, we're gonna have to move because I've scared myself so bad. I won't go in the basement anymore because it's too scary. But anyway, that gives you a little taste of what I'm writing. It's always the basement, right? I mean,
That's pretty brave to set a thriller in your own home.
well, or stupid, I don't know. I didn't even think about it. I just thought it all came because I went to a book event, and the last person in line always has something interesting to talk about. And this day up in Massachusetts at a book event, a woman asked me, will you come talk to my my writing group about, creative writing? And I said, yeah, sure. I mean, I like talking about process and all of that. And she said, and I said, well, where's your group? What kind of women are they? And she said, well, actually they're men, and it's at a prison. And in Massachusetts, prisons are rated 1 through 5, 5 being maximum security. And she said, this is a 5, but don't worry, you will be wired in case of an assault. And I just was like, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm way into prison reform, but I don't know. I got nervous about it. So I didn't end up going, especially because my husband was like, are you crazy? But I started thinking, what if I had? What if something happened? Anyway, that's the genesis of it. So I thought, what better place to set it than my own house? And it made for fun writing. And I don't know if the people in my town are going to, think it's great, but I don't know. I present the town in a good way, so hopefully they'll like it.
Well, good. I guess I have a personal question. So you said you wrote Lilac Girls in 2016.
It came out in
Came
2016.
out that was your first book.
Yes.
So how did you decide to be an author? I mean,
what was I doing otherwise, you mean?
I know, raising 3 kids, I get that. But you're such a historian. I mean, you could be a great professor, really, in the way you really can. I feel that way. I just learned so much. But what were you doing, and what made you think I can write a book?
Oh, good question. I think if I knew now, I would have been way intimidated. But sometimes that's good, to not know what lies ahead. Sometimes it's good, and you just forge right in. I had not studied creative writing in school at all. I went to Syracuse undergrad for journalism, and then I went to Northwestern for grad school for journalism. I think my parents thought that I was going to be like Oprah or like Barbara Walters, and that didn't happen. I just I got a job out of school writing commercials, and I thought, this is sweet. You can get paid to do that. That's crazy. And so I did that for a long time, met my husband. He had a really big job. That's why we moved to Atlanta, because he was the CEO of the Weather Channel. So I kind of moved around with him. He worked at Time Warner for a long time. And eventually we ended up in Connecticut at the beginning of that story. But I had retired by that point with 3 little kids. I had a son who was a big kid and a big baby, and he kicked the slats out of his bed, out of his crib, and walked out. I think I kept him in his crib too long or something, but I felt I have to be at home with these children. So I had retired, and I had a wonderful, very privileged life, but I felt like something was missing. I just couldn't put my finger on it. But I never thought of writing anything except maybe like an advertising pamphlet for the Woolsey-Ferriday house when I went up there, because they didn't have one. And I thought, this place should get more advertising because it's a very cool place. But I swear to you, I never thought, oh, I should write a book. That didn't happen until way later, almost 5 years after that. And I just started going up to the house and hanging out in the archives, and because you could do that back then. It was the old root cellar. Now they've changed things so that they bring archival boxes up to you if you're researching. But I was so curious about her. I loved to garden. I was always like going up and looking at her gardening books. And I feel like maybe I needed kind of a role model in a way. I felt like, after my mother was gone, I don't know, I needed a purpose, and I didn't know what I was looking for really. But then once I moved down to Atlanta, and a book editor had said to me, you really should write this story. This could be a great novel. And once I had that Starbucks, the caffeine just made me write it. Thank God, because, it's one of those things that, how do you know unless you try it? If something can really resonate with you. So
that's the ultimate pivot. That's terrific.
That's a great way to put it.
It really is. Susan asks, would you consider writing about the survivors of the Armistead in Connecticut? At the old state house, I learned about an African woman that lived in Farmington for a while. Do you know anything about that?
Oh, no, I don't, but I would. That's a fabulous story.
Yeah.
There are so many hidden stories like that. You just wonder, they're all just kind of waiting for somebody to come along and do it. But yeah, that's an amazing story.
So, and I know all our participants always want to know what's on your nightstand. What are you reading? Are there new authors that you've been exposed to lately that we need to take a look at? So,
oh gosh, what have I got here? I always have I just started, they send me lots of books for me to blurb, and I just started The Last Checkmate, which is coming out. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, okay.
She is a debut author, which is always really fun. So I think that's going to be really awesome. And I'm reading a lot of thrillers, as you can imagine, because I'm writing one. And I think that's the best way really to figure out how to write something, is to read them. And Never Have I Ever, I loved, by Jocelyn Jackson. And I just started The Guest List. And I love the tagline here, you'd kill to be on it. I just started this one. You can see I've got all my little.
It's good. That's a great Agatha Christie type, yummy thriller.
Agatha Christie.
Yeah.
I think she gets a bad rap, Agatha, because my mother, God, she read every one of them. But yeah, I think she gets a bad rap for being kind of cliche a little bit, but I think she's a genius. And so yeah, can't wait.
Okay. Now talk to us. Have people have folks approached you about optioning your books to do film?
Yeah, originally Elizabeth Moss from Handmaid's Tale wanted to be Herta, which was really fun, but they didn't get that through the hoop, which is sad. But now, I can't really talk about other things, but yes. That's all I can say. Yes.
I mean, any of these books would be amazing films, or even a
Aw.
mishmash of them all.
You
They'd
know,
be,
it's hard these days with historical fiction. I think that it's expensive,
mm.
all the costumes and not always the target market that, Netflix wants. So, but yeah, we're working on it. Let's put it that way.
So I have a question. Do you have to, I know probably people always ask you this, but do you have to read your books in order?
You know what? That has been surprisingly the number one question with these books. No, they're all standalone. But I was in a forum yesterday on, I think it was Facebook. I just like stumbled. I looked at one of my posts and all these people have been commenting and stuff. So I went in there and started talking to people. And that was a huge thing. And people were saying, that hadn't read Lilac Girls, that they were starting with Sunflower Sisters and then, moving forward in time. And they said that they really liked that. But then other people were saying they read them in the order that they were published and they really liked that. So there was this like, not a fight, but there was this, going back and forth about what was the better way to do it. And then somebody just said, they're all standalone. You can just read them however you want to read them. And yeah, I don't know. I think that if I hadn't started, well, I mean, I wrote them, so it's kind of dumb for me to weigh in. It does seem like if you enjoy reading that way, kind of in the right order in terms of logistically, I think that starting with Sunflower Sisters might be kind of fun because I put some Easter eggs in there so that the Woolsey silver, for example, that comes back, by the time you get to Lilac Girls, Caroline is using the Woolsey silver. So I put a lot of things like that in the books. So it might be kind of fun to see those things being used and then later, see them in the books. I don't know.
That's a good idea. So that Sunflower Sisters is my first. I think I'm going to go backwards. It says a lot about your personality. If you're really OCD, you need to go in order. I mean, but I think all the characters are so rich that you can't go wrong. And the stories are so compelling. So compelling.
Yeah, either way, either direction, I think.
So when do you think you'll be back in person doing some in-person tours?
I know when actually.
Tell us.
I say that and now I can't remember. I just did my calendar. I know for sure I'm doing a fundraiser, like a big benefit in New Canaan at the New Canaan Library. And then going out to California for some events, which will be really fun. And I think there's another like big luncheon in Avon. It's all on my events page. And then after that, it's all in person. So yeah. Oh, I can't wait to get back out there. I mean, not that I don't love this because, I can wear jeans and still, seem somewhat pulled together. But I still, there's no substitute for being with the readers. I mean, for me anyway, that's the reward after writing a book is getting out there and, getting to talk to people and, it's just the fun part. So it's going to be fun.
So I've done a lot of events this week with a variety of authors, and during COVID, they got together with other authors. Do you have a writing group, or especially during the pandemic, was there a time where you met with other writers, historical fiction writers or whatever, it seems to be
yeah.
a lot, really.
We kind of had to band together a little bit. I did a wonderful event with Kate Quinn because her book kind of came out when mine did. Mm-hmm. And I did on my virtual book tour, I did maybe 4 or 5 different events with other authors. Yeah, it was really, really fun. You at least feel like you're seeing other people when you do that.
Right.
But it's just been hard. I think people will continue to do virtual events or have that option, which is really nice. I mean, you can just kind of, zoom into a book talk in California if you want. It's nice to have that flexibility.
I think it will be definitely hybrid from now on, but we just so appreciate learning. The history was amazing. and do go on Martha's website, because I found that the family trees were super helpful by picture, kind of giving you, even before you delve into any of the books, giving you a better picture of the generations.
It does
But
help. I know I used mine. I had
it really, really helps. It really helps. This was delightful. Please come back to visit us at RJ's. And
Oh my God, you know I will.
anyone watching, sign copies at RJ Julia's and Wesley and RJ Julia's. I'm going to tease you again with this beautiful signature. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us.
Thank you, Patty.
And
just the
thanks
best.
to all our participants.
Bye, guys.